I'm John. Several of you probably know who I am, see me around. I'm not here as often as I'd like to be here due to my role, my work, and the nature of the world right now and what's happening. Bad things happen, obviously. I was asked to come in and do a back to basics, so I'm going to try to keep this as agnostic from Microsoft as possible, believe it or not. I'm not going to try to sell you something. I don't work in sales anyway. I'm an engineer. But I want to cover some things that are kind of closely related. Dark markets, risk targets. How many of you are like security budget decision makers in the room? Couple. All right. I may or may not be your good friend after this. Just say. But no, hopefully some good takeaways on how to more effectively use your money. As well as the tools that you probably have at your disposal, primarily in the SOC and what line of sight they may have. And then for those who have never really seen things about dark markets, I'm not getting too deep in it because I don't want to get in trouble. But go through it. So there's a disclaimer, yay. And a couple of quick things before we get started. Usually when there's a talk about dark markets or things that go on in this part of the web, there's usually this desire to go look and try things and probe around. So I've got to tell you this because legally we're required to tell people this. Don't. You may not like your computer anymore. It may not work anymore, depending on what's going on. But for those of you, just a kind of quick show of hands, how many of you use Tor? All right, good. And you don't have to share any more than that. Don't want to. Because it can be... you can get yourself in trouble very, very easily. And one of the things that's extremely important about what happens in the world of cybercrime is just like real physical criminals, extremely opportunistic. When there's a new vulnerability that's disclosed, obviously being from Microsoft, when we release a patch for something and we align that to some CVE, there is your recognition to the rest of the world that, hey, we know that there's a problem. We fixed that problem without you knowing about it probably, hopefully. But now that is starting the ticker on these opportunistic things happening. Someone looking for code, someone finding a way to potentially take advantage of that vulnerability, exploit the systems. It's when we see a big uptick in the go live on the bad things happening, especially when it involves things like our favorites, RDP and things like that. Because everyone starts scanning for 389. All those fun things. And one of the things that's important to understand too is that not only are they opportunistic, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with some of the more advanced threat actors and threat groups that are out there. I mean, they've got their own supply chains and some things I'm going to speak to because it's an economy for them. It's a money-making deal. And they're out to make money. Who cares if lives are lost or people have bad days? It really comes down to that money thing. So, as far as, I'm not going to cover that thing. First thing that's probably the most important, and this is where we find most of the mistakes being made before I dive into some of the other topics. Credential hygiene. Hopefully everyone has learned you don't have to be admin all the time. And admin shouldn't be like what you check the email with and what you browse web with and things of that nature. Domain admins probably shouldn't be logging in on a mobile phone or taking part in enterprise training through a third party with the domain admin account, things like that. That's a well understood concept, right? Well practiced? No, absolutely not. I can't stress how important this is because once something gets popped, once there's if you're giving them system, which is basically what you're doing with the domain admin, the entire house burns down very, very quickly. It's like, what's the point of locking the garage if the front door is wide open? It makes no sense whatsoever. And one of the things that's accelerating this, of course, is the fact that there's more and more cloud involvement with business. You look at all the big enterprises that are out there, they've got some kind of cloud usage. We're very, very happy about all those that are using Office 365. Not so happy about those that are syncing those admin accounts and getting email and whatnot. That's really, really, really bad. But cloud helps speed things up. You've heard of the things like the password sprays and things of that nature. Take some random passwords. I know all the email accounts because they're kind of obvious. They're on LinkedIn. things like that. And you just hit them all and see what I can get into. And if you don't have MFA, well, then it's game over eventually. Someone's going to pop those things. We actually have an API. You can query passwords to see if someone's password has been compromised or not. But credential theft is by far one of the biggest lead-ins to the overall compromise that's going to take place. And that's typically the goal as well. Once I get patient 0, I try to find out what's there, do my Mimikatz, do whatever, find my access paths to domain admin and take advantage of those things. Things that are very, very important is making sure that you have backups. The world of ransomware is rampant. Many calls this week. Some more of our friends in the world of public sector have been hit again. Even with all the things they're supposed to do or not do, they just still don't want to admit that they're doing things wrong. And unfortunately, politics take precedent over technical prowess, things of that nature. Also, making sure that you stay patched. Can't stress that enough. There are previews available if you happen to be one of our premier customers. You get things on the 20th of the month, or what we call Wave D, because our weeks are A, B, C, D. Some months have 5th week, but we don't do anything with those. If you're in that program, you can play with the security updates almost 2 full weeks before they go public. Again, application impacts, things of that nature. Find out what might be breaking in your environment when you go to patch things. Reduce the time to have things bake in test and dev and lower UAT environments, things of that nature, before they go into production. Because, like I've already mentioned, when we release a patch, that means we fix something. It now means you have vulnerable systems starting, at 3 a.m. on that Tuesday morning that are potentially, if they're exposed to the outside world or if they're VMs running in a cloud somewhere, they're a target. That's the reality. Time to patch needs to be accelerated as much as possible. Yes, I'm going to take the Microsoft hat off for a second. We have screwed the world a few times in the last year with some bad patches and regressions. It does happen because we can't anticipate all those things and all those workloads that run on VMware. But that was a joke. We're going to blame VMware, and we're going to blame Symantec and a bunch of others for people who got hit with those things. And then, of course, increasing priority around the applications and the security of the systems in general. Putting in baselines or CIS, benchmarks of some type, STIGs if you have to be PubSec, military, so that there's some hardening going on. The takeaway is, of course, and this is what my talk over the next, 30, 40 minutes is going to be around, is basically a 0, 1, 2, 3. First one is understanding things, learning how to properly prioritize your risk. That's the risk targets piece of this. Then what do you actually do? Some implementations. I'm going to skip the salesmanship on that, but then also understanding some exploration opportunities that may be out there. And if anyone wants to follow up with me on some things or wants some more information or get connected to somebody else on our side, I've got almost a third of a box of cards up here. It should be enough. So, are y'all ready? So, cyber attackers have to get their goods from somewhere if they're not making them themselves. And that's when you talk about advanced threat actors, they are doing a lot of development. In many cases, they're really, really good at developing those toolkits and those remote access Trojans and whatever those things happen to be that are out there. But it's a pretty wild gambit out there as far as the diversification, the resources that they have. Some have a lot of money, but not a lot of talent. So guess what they do? They buy things. Those that have a lot of talent, not so much money, well, they're going to go get some money first, and then they're going to do some more work. Various campaigns that happen to exist. And then defense is not always a technical thing. It's very cultural. It's kind of the joking thing about how well is credential hygiene practiced. How many of you actually have root level access to systems? You shouldn't have told me, but anyway. That's one of the things. One of the first things that we see happens, if a customer is putting in CyberArk or any of the other solutions, Lieberman and even our own, is it tends to be the worst offender are those that have the high privilege because now they have a roadblock. And they want to find a way around it because they have all the power to do so, and they should be unrestricted. In many cases, the worst offenders from doing things the right way are those with all the privilege, the ones that are supposed to be directly targeted by these types of tools that you invest a lot of money on or into in some cases. And so it's got to be kind of a behavioral and cultural change within the organization to do things right. And then if you've got some good security stewards that pop people on the head when they're doing things the wrong way, that's always a really, really good thing to practice. And then also, you've got to understand how to read intelligence. What are you using as your sources? What is out there from maybe a graph perspective, like our security graph or any of the others? We've opened that up to third parties. It's kind of free for the most part. But what's really, really important? There's a fun little exercise. I think I left the slide out, so if I did, I'll cover that a little bit later. But it's a fun exercise I like doing with SOCs, where it's asking them what's the biggest risk to the organization, and you get a totally different answer from the firewall person. You get a different answer from the authenticated proxy. You get a totally different answer from the CISO and things like that, because there's bias. They want to hold on to their technology that they're responsible for. And that's obviously gives them a purpose. So therefore, that's the most important thing. But if you look at the data, and I'm going to go deeper into this, that's where you really want your SOC and your security team to be, which is understanding what is the real risk to the organization. And that's what they should be focused on. And it's obviously where your money should be going towards as well. So intelligence investment. There's a lot going on, and attacks can be bought, and they can be done as services. That's something that's really been spinning up over the last couple of years here. So just think of platform as a service or software as a service. There's attack as a service. There's ransomware variants that are out there that are pretty cool too, where they're going to keep a third of the money, or maybe they'll do the actual email campaign for phishing and maybe make some ad revenue off some things they put on there. Who knows what? Crypto mining is also another fun one, depending on how that model plays and how much the group actually makes off of that. But it's there's a two-part strategy behind this. The first one, of course, is outsourcing the commodity of, I guess that was me, around the threat intelligence, and of course then focus on what is unique or important to the organization. Taking that information and turning it into business intelligence for the most part. What would they target, which is a really, really big one? If someone's coming at you and they have no idea what's there, if it's a completely black box type scenario, what are they going to find? What are they going to discover? What are they going to get from the public knowledge that's out there from the website or from LinkedIn profiles of employees and things of that nature? In many cases, that's going to be kind of the initial guiding light of where to start the footprinting before there's actual enumeration into the environment. And of course, what is the business impact? What's the damage potential from all those targets? So if you're not a practicer in the world of security of threat modeling, you should do this with pretty much anything in your environment. Because it's a one way of kind of getting into that mindset of the attacker and what are all the possibilities that could happen, and then you can put some prioritizations around your defense and what's go in there. And of course, the big thing, which is trying to disrupt their return on investment, because again, certain pieces of anything attacker or major advanced threat group is going to do is going to be somewhat based on some of these commodities, things that they can buy up off dark markets. So some definitions around these markets. The open forums. This is the safe land of things. These are obviously things that aren't registered in DNS for the most part. Hint the torrent, or there's torrents, but torrents are one thing that are out there that kind of go into this. But the extensions, the onion links that happen to be there. Anybody on the internet can get to these if you know about them. Unfortunately, it's no easy thing. You have to find a way to learn more about those. Then you get into the dark web, which is a smaller chunk of this. Just think of it as like a turned upside down, or I guess right side up iceberg here. The regular internet is at the bottom, which is a very, very small piece of what's out there. A lot of things in the dark web are not necessarily malicious or bad in any case. I mean, a lot of universities have dark web participation. Internal research and things that's going on is dark web. It's just unpublished. It's not being seen or indexed by any of the crawlers. It is discoverable in many cases. But when you get to the very tough part of it, the vetted forums, this is where you have either done something illegal, you're about to do something illegal, or you are participating in something whether you knew it or not. In many cases, these are invitation-only type forums, or you have to come with some type of collateral. You have to bring data and prove your worth to these groups. And then, of course, that's where there's the opportunity for making money or developing something and contributing, and, of course, getting on FBI lists and all those other fun things, Interpol. These are all referred to as dark markets in some way. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're all bad. It's actually a very small piece of that. The personas within these are across a pretty wide spectrum. Many of us, like myself, are in this world of gray hats. I do red team activities, I do blue team activities, purple head, but we do cross the line of some things that are potentially, some misdemeanors on the daily. But it's one of those things where you've got to, obviously be aware of what you're doing, and you've got legal backing that's going to protect you for if you are going to participate in this world. I guess I should click. The motivations in many cases from a gray hat is really, it's non-criminal in nature. It's purpose of research. And that's like what we like to call ourselves. We're research engineers. Trying to learn what's going on there. And again, because it's non-criminal, we're not really looking directly for an advantage from a monetary reward perspective. It's really for dissemination of intelligence to others and make the world a better place. Yes? Insurance. No. Good luck ever getting them to pay on anything anyway. What side of insurance are you talking about? Like the traditional cyber insurance policy. If I get popped, then I'm covered. Oh, those are worthless, but anyway. I know you may have to have them because some industries, but I think there's been this many payouts ever. So I'm not a big fan of them. It's actually delayed a lot of things from an investigation standpoint because the insurance company had to do their investigation and ill-equipped and unprepared to do so. That was a big one with the city of New Orleans here just a couple weeks ago. They had to hold off for insurance and something from the state. The script kiddies. I watch a YouTube video. I am an expert. I'm a militia. No, it's so, unprofessional in any nature. These are the ones that are going to get caught very easily. They're looking for a quick reward, or in some cases, trying to prove that they're capable of doing something and not really much so. You have to start somewhere, though. I'm not bashing the script kiddies by any means. But when you're putting together things that are built by others, in many cases, they've been made available because of high visibility or lack of usefulness. Maybe that was an attack from a couple years ago. Everyone's passed. Everyone's gotten away from it. Good luck. It probably won't work anymore, but it may still be something useful in some organizations. Then you have the black hats, which is where we get into the profit model. And I'm going to show the ROI equation here in a few moments. And again, this is part of building that reputation, working our way up into the world of elites, and then finally gaining membership into the ranks of some threat group that may be out there. One of the APTs, we give them various designations on the periodic table at Microsoft. The rest of the world gives them numbers or other cool code names, which is kind of funny. You'll notice there's a lot of numbers missing because they're in the US. They're us. We do them too. A lot of people forget about that. And then, of course, there's going to be links to all of these in many cases, especially when you're looking at some of the Twitter feeds. Gray hats are pulling information from elites, or you find information within forums from those elites, and black hats that happen to be out there. And of course, they build off of each other, and in many cases form the big toolkits that are there. The motivations and the operation, I don't want to spend way too much time on this because I don't want to miss things, but hopefully this will be shared out. If not, I'll be happy to share it with anybody who wants a copy of it. Over time, what has been made available in the dark markets has grown dramatically. As far as the fun little toolkits, and I know it's an eye chart and a half, but this is some freely available information as far as what you could quickly find and what is out there. It is, 2017, I know that's 2 years ago, but it's gotten pretty wild and crazy. The evolution over time of all the various solutions. And when I talk about solutions, I'm talking about the little pieces of code or tools that go into the package that gets deployed out to an environment for whatever purpose, whether it's to pull credentials, whether it's to access databases, create remote access, persistence, things of that nature. There's quite a bit out there. And of course, like I mentioned, there's a supply chain. It's an ecosystem. And there's a lot that feeds or that the attackers depend on in the supply chain. And I just want to briefly cover many of these areas and what's there. As far as what goes into a lot of the packages and what the advanced threat groups are leveraging, yes, 0 days are still out there. They're insanely expensive. So even though they only make up for about single-digit percentage of the attacks that the Azure monitors are picking up, it's just really, really unlikely. These things can get up into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the potential. Just remember that Windows 7 and 2008 go out of support. This is our last patch for them next Tuesday. There is a pretty firm belief that there is a 0 day out there in the wind just waiting for us to not be able to patch it. So there's that. That's an unfortunate reality. Get off those systems if you can. As far as loads themselves, whether it's a PC or mobile type load, those are pretty cheap. Denial of service attacks and those things again can be done as a service. You can pay it as a monthly subscription. These things are really, really cheap. And again, there's a lot of things that are out there that can keep you away from becoming a victim of things like denial of service, proxy attacks. And then we get into the other side, which is our fun world of ransomware, which can be very, very cheap, or you pay someone a portion of things. And then you have the campaigns, the spear phishing, and of course, compromised accounts, where the spear phish has already been successful and someone is selling, someone's account that has remote access into the environment. In most cases, it's capable of doing something, and these things can be somewhat cheap, or they can be extremely expensive. The one that was sold for $400 million was the CISO of Exxon. For those that remember the Exxon hack, or maybe y'all don't know about the Exxon hack, but basically it went for big bucks for that. Because just imagine what you could do with one of the world's largest energy companies with that credential. But the average, less than $1, nothing too wild and crazy. Attack services are inexpensive. So all those things that can be done, they kind of float around those same areas: denial of service, spear phishing, ransomware, just to build it out. Quite a fun stuff. And loads, these things can get really, really cheap. Again, I'll be happy to share this. So the knowledge, this is the most important part. Understanding how to prioritize things. So as far as the understanding, the prioritization, and understanding how do you disrupt the potential kill chain that goes with all the fraud and abuses. And there's so many clicks that I can get to where I want to be. Here we go. Defender's return on investment is, and again, this is speaking more to those that are making decisions on security budgets, understanding what you need to defend against and what are the biggest risks. What are these things that you need to target? And then the SROI this is something put together by Mark Simos. If you don't follow him or connect with him on LinkedIn, you really should, because he posts a lot of good things. He's our chief cybersecurity architect within the cybersecurity group. But defender investment, obviously, these are the things that go from that are paid for from your budget, and of course the attention, the team time, and the training and everything goes into that, and then ruining the attacker's ROI is what you're trying to do. You want to try to make an attack as complicated and as expensive for them as you possibly can, because they are winning in this game. The previous slides were trying to tell that narrative that attacks are unbelievably cheap, and they're highly effective because there's a new ransomware impact every day, if not two, for something big in the world. And most of those are being bought for less than $100, which is really, really sad. Or they're using variations of kits that are under $1,000. So if you can make something difficult or disrupt that return on their investment in some given way and still keep things up and running in your environment, you win. And unfortunately, that's a battle that a lot of organizations are losing. So, the return is for them is a successful attack, and of course, the investment is the cost of the attack. Make it more expensive. In most cases, what we know from our big premier customers, especially like the top 40, they've got so much going on from a security perspective that they're still targets, but a lot of the low-hanging fruit type of attacks, they're not a potential target. They're not going to come after those big companies. I happen to work with one of them. I work with number 4. I'm dedicated to them. So, in that case, it's going to be someone who's coming at them with hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars invested into their attack. They were popped back in 2016, but it was internal. It was no public information, and nothing got out to the outside world. But it was an internal if you want to call it that. They did it on purpose. They just want to see what they could do and make a point, and it created a lot of changes in the environment. And hopefully what you get out of this is a very pragmatic approach to the defense mechanisms, meaning you're probably going to have a solution for just about anything that can possibly happen, but you want to put some heightened interest in very specific areas. And then that's where we as humans make some really, really bad mistakes across this. You want to try to focus on things that are going to have the highest return on investment. And as we know, security solutions are not cheap. So you may not be able to get all of them. You want the ones that are going to have the biggest impact for your organization. And leveraging the intelligence, and of course, then building your unique posture that's basically specific to your business. There's so many things that are off the shelf or common solutions that are out there that everyone tends to use, and we see that, like we go to a banking customer, we see the same 10 things. You go to the next bank, you see the same 10 things. It's like, were they all in a meeting together and said, hey, we need these 10 things? That's not how you deal with things, unfortunately. And this is why they do this. How many of you are afraid to fly or get in the ocean? I don't like flying. I fly a ton, though. But yes, that's why I have these things, to help out and maybe a pill. But this is the reality. The one thing that we choose to do because we think it's the safest, maybe it's because we're in control of it, is drive. But that's from an odds perspective, the risk evaluation, it's potentially the worst for us from a living perspective. Highly unlikely that you're going to go down in a plane because those millions of parts have to be working all together all the time while you're in the air. But then like the sharks, unless you live in North Carolina and you go to the Outer Banks, it's because they changed the rules of shrimping. That's why they do it. But it's closer to the ocean or seashore now. So blame the fishery. But yeah, this is what we kind of do with a lot of things in security. Is we make the wrong decisions on what is the real risk around things. And a lot of the reasons for unintelligence, do you have data? Are you tapped into a data source and signals? What are you using to capture things? And in many cases, a joke slide that I usually keep in here, which is the Willy Wonka, is you log everything. We've practically caught them already. Just because you capture everything doesn't mean you have any intelligence. You have evidence, potentially. If you actually did record everything, you probably do have some evidence. But you want intelligent signals. You want something, and just so you know, we share our signals, our 450 billion signals that we get from every authentication in Azure every day goes into our graph, and it's out there, as well as all the attacks that are hitting our CDNs and things of that nature. It's out there. It's built into our products, but I'm not here to sell things. Do you have anything that's detecting what's going on? So it's one thing to have that intelligence, but what are you doing from a signal generation perspective yourselves? Like what is actually actively coming after your organization at the edge? or within the communications. What are your users doing in the egress? What are they going out to from a browsing perspective? And is there any intelligence off of that? If there's been something happening in the environment, how deep do you go into the root cause analysis? Do you actually fully understand from a forensics perspective, how did that come to occur? How did it happen? What could you have done from control perspective to limit that and prevent it from happening again? Especially if it's something that's happening frequently. So as far as, this is that little exercise. I did leave it in here. Good. I love doing this when I do security assessments with organizations. I get them like they're all been brought in on charges, put them in a room by themselves, isolate them from their other team members, and ask them the 3 questions. Or I shouldn't say ask the 3 questions, but go through this one by one. What's the number one problem or risk or, to your organization? Out of that, and if you even help them out and give them these things, these 10 items, 0 days, unpatched systems, blah, 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 you'll probably get inconsistencies across the team. Because again, they're going to come at it with a response that's a little bit biased around whatever their part of the solution is from a security perspective. Are they the firewall administrator? Are they endpoint detection? Things like that. If that answer is not consistent, or maybe if it even is consistent, like maybe they've been listening to what their manager or the CISO has been preaching for the last couple months, is there data that actually backs that up for the environment? Because what happens, and I'm sorry I'm having to skip over root cause, is that you end up with all these things that you think are important, so you get all these solutions, and they're all treated somewhat equally, which is unfortunate. And that's very, very inefficient. So what should happen is this. Based on data, based on intelligence, there should be a glimmering number one. And that should be the major focus of everything. Whether it's budget, attention, training, things of that nature. And then you have your high business impacts, potentially, that are there. They get attention as well. Maybe 1 or 2, maybe 5 or 7 of those things. In many cases, there's a solution that addresses all of them at once, which is great. Sometimes there's not. It does require you to get some specializations in those. But then everything else is there's a low likelihood, it's a lower risk perspective, but you still have to give it attention. And the end result of this is that you're going to have some kind of mapping out that gets you into where you've applied, hopefully things that from a historical or data perspective, you're now protected for. You're constantly learning, taking this intelligence and evolving the posture and applying those as whatever is new and happening. And especially when the new CVEs are released or there's new patches for things, does this affect us? Are we using that product? Or where are we at in getting rid of it potentially? And then everything else is left in those little tiny dots. There should be high focus on the key things that are unique to your organization. And just because Bank 1, Bank 2, Bank 3, and yes, I work in financial sector, we see those 10 solutions, there really should not be the same 10. Hate to say it, because some of them are the old brick and mortar banks, some of them are online services, financial services, some of them are investment type things. They're dealing with other types of markets. They don't move money around like the Swifts and the bigger banks do, things like that. And that's what should be happening. And that should be the main driver for threat intelligence. And threat intelligence can be bought. You don't have to have the experts in-house. It's where our graph comes into play. Things that goes into our products, which, sorry, I didn't mean to leave that one in there. Not selling anything. But, it is out there. We feed it in all the signals from all those various things. Just picking on Azure for a second. And of course, visibility comes from all the things that can happen from just the very beginning of an email message all the way to what may be useful off of that. We try to do things as being one of the more talked about security companies over the last year, and to maximizing your visibility. It's what our products are really trying to do out of things. But again, I'm not going to try to sell things. Come on, I'm trying to get to the last one. Another fun strategy don't know if anyone's done this. I'm a big proponent of doing things from a honey perspective, whether it's HoneyNet or honey accounts, honey tokens. One big word of caution: if you do create some things, just be sure that they're kept out of the reachability of actual employees and actual business processes, because we've seen this happen. They become used. And unfortunately, that's a very bad thing, especially when you do something really damaging in those documents or emails that are calling out specific people or certain actions, and then someone acts on them. That can get you in a world of legal trouble. But it's how a lot of it's a great way of detecting some of those more advanced threat actors, especially with the honey tokens. If you're worried about things from a credential compromise perspective, it's a great way, because no one's supposed to use those accounts. So as soon as you see that token or that hash being passed somewhere, everything is logged to the 11s on the dial of 10. So you've got something that you can hopefully trace very quickly and have everything about what transpired on that. And hopefully you can turn that in and get some legal help if it was potentially damaging or they were trying to do some damage. Final thoughts and the things to close with, because I was trying to finish before 6 here and get a little bit of question time, is you really have to try to figure out and understand what is truly critical to your organization. And maybe you are the firewall admin. It's okay, but you need to be aware of what the big issue is, and it might be outside of your purview of things. Know that. Know how you're a part of that control, hopefully in an environment. There is no magic bullet, silver bullet, whatever you want to call these things, to what's happening out there. It's a concert effort. There's many cogs in the beast that have to be aligned and working efficiently. And if things aren't properly prioritized and set, then it's not going to be efficient. It's going to be whack-a-mole because you've got a new hot item week over week, day over day, or whatever the latest headline happens to be. That's where the focus goes. You want to be focused on what's real. Using that, I've got data, I've got intelligence. Here's some new information. Does that change what we started with? And then there's everything else, which still gets attention. It's the tough part of it. But implementing things that are based on whether it's our security graph or a feed that's coming from one of the others, if you don't have one yourself, applying those prioritizations. And of course, I'm a big fan of it, but if you want to be aware of potential persistence or really powerful things happening in the environment, honey token strategies, honey documents, things of that nature are really, it worked for Cliff Stoll 30 years ago. It still works today. It's amazing. For those that haven't read the Cuckoo's Egg, read it. He's a wildcat. But with that, it was meant to be a quick thing, not my full 2 hours going deep into this. Any questions that I can answer? Yes.
You're talking about on the return on investment for things, and you're talking about the probabilities or the likelihood of things happening. What about the value of the target asset?
I want everyone to hear it. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, is on him.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about a return on investment, and you're talking about the likelihood of certain things happening, the probabilities, that sort of thing. How does the value of the target asset factor into your list of critical things?
Oh, all right. So if you know that business makes X number of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, that comes from business impact statements that are hopefully part of the risk management that's already happening in the environment. There should be some type of quantitative analysis done on exactly how much revenue or how much business is associated with any asset. You obviously don't want to spend more than what something is worth. And that's one of the biggest mistakes we see in a lot of organizations. The endpoint protections and all the agents and solutions they put in there cost more than the laptop that's running, basically a cache box, because all they're doing is checking email and browsing the web. That's misappropriation in its finest. I don't know the perfect answer for that one, because it's going to be different depending on what you're looking at, what the type of business is. In many cases, it's not something that has a direct control associated with it. If it's a service-oriented industry, the thing that you're really, really protecting is the reputation more than anything. Someone who shows up and does a job and everything's happy. You can't put a technical control around a lot of pieces of that. So in many cases, the focus there is going to be on maybe the technology behind what gets that person to that location, and how do they check in, and how do they do the reports, things of that nature. I don't know if I'm hitting your answer or not.
Well, I was actually just asking it as a leading question, and you were talking about the sort of things that go into figuring out what the value of your assets are, so you can come up with a prioritized list.
Yeah, and that's hopefully something CISO's doing, with company controller and whatnot, which is, what do we have to have that's critical functioning, and how much is that worth? And that goes into those insurance type conversations as well. It's not an area that I play in. I'm the geek in the corner on the laptop that's showing them how bad things were and what could be done better, not the business conversations. Yeah, full disclosure. Yeah, I don't like get pulled into the C conversations. I do get pulled into the C-level conversations sometimes, but it's just like, the eyes glass over, and I'm going to go back out here. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, you said we should contact or connect with on LinkedIn?
Oh, follow Mark Simos. He's Chief Cybersecurity Architect in the Enterprise Security Group for Microsoft. And then another fun one is Ann Johnson. She's our CVP of Security. Very, very active on Twitter, very, very active on LinkedIn. Simos, S-I-M-O-S.
Do you have any particular resources to find out more about the honey tokens?
As in how-tos?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So there's actually a Microsoft Docs. It is aligned to how to implement them within our own products. But within that, it basically explains what it is and how it can be done. You don't have to have one of our products to do these. If you really want to spend some money, you definitely can. If you have an E5, then you have Azure ATP, which has the capability as well. So maybe make sure you're leveraging that functionality. If you are paying for an E5, but E5s are expensive. And ATA is still around, the Advanced Threat Analytics, which has a honey token capability for silver token, golden token, all those fun token attacks, so it can be detected. But basically, you're creating an account within the directory. You don't change the password for it because the hash will change, and you look for that hash in your system's network captures and things at all times. And then everything is turned up, like I said, all the way on auditing of that account. Anyone who touches it, anyone who tries to use it, you go ask them why, because they're not supposed to. And it doesn't have to be a privileged account. Just like the honey documents and things, they don't have to be confidential or critical in nature. Just make sure the right words are in there somewhere, something that makes it interesting. Yeah, and in fact, a lot of the advanced threat groups over the last short while are moving away from the high visibility type accounts. They may pop a domain admin account in order to create all the blue cards. So just standard users who have remote access can get in, can access a certain application. They fit into a worker role. It's a lot easier to hide down at that level because you don't monitor what everybody is doing in the environment. You monitor what the privileged people are doing in most cases. They've learned that, and they're using that, which is sad, because that's where you see in the bad places where 4-hour access times, because they roll the passwords. Here's a VPN connection for 4 hours. Go see what you can find, and you pay a couple bucks for it. Yeah, it's bad. It's real. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.